Hi guys, how is everyone doing? Today is a really exciting video because it is a full every book I read this year. So this is like the most major wrap up I've ever done and I'm really excited about it. I'm gonna try to make this video as quick as humanly possible. Also, it is like pouring right now, so if you hear that, that's what's going on. That's why it's 2:30 p.m. still in my jammies. The first book I read this year was Addicted for Now. I think this is the fourth book in the Addicted series. It might be the fifth. I loved it. I thought it was really good. And then I read A Court of Frost and Starlight. This is the fourth in the Akatar series. And I liked it. I thought it was cute. It reminded me of that like holiday princess special. You know what I'm talking about, with all of like the princesses. And then I read Does It Hurt? This book was scary. Next I read Kiss the Sky. This is another book in the Addicted series, and this book was, I loved it. This is probably my favorite book in the whole series. Next I read The Outsiders. I actually had never read this book before, but I was taking a class on young adult fiction, so I read this and I liked it. Next I read Kingdom of the Wicked. This is a fantasy book and I actually really enjoyed this book. I thought it was pretty good. I didn't end up continuing the series and I don't think I ever will, so do with that information what you will. Next I read Monster, and this book is actually in like a screenplay format, which is so cool, and like I like unconventional books. I thought this was really neat. This is another book for my young adult fiction class and I really enjoyed it. Next I read Heartless. This book is another Elsie Silver. It's the second in her little series and I really liked this one. I thought this was so cute. Hot House Flower, another Addicted book. This one is good. I didn't like it as much as Kiss the Sky, but again, like this series overall is so good that you have to read it, and that was not a chore at all. I really liked this book. Next I read Long Division, and this is another unconventional book because like look, isn't that so cool? Like you read the first half and then you flip it over and read the second half. It's so cool, but I always felt like an idiot when I was reading it in public and it looked like I was reading my book upside down. But oh my gosh, this book was, it was cool. It was another book for my young adult fiction class. And it was very unconventional, very strange, but really cool. I liked it. Next, I read Flawless. This is another Elsie Silver book, another cowboy romance. This is another Forced Proximity. I think this is like kind of a workplace romance. Like he's a professional bull rider and she is like his assistant or something. I don't really know. I don't remember it that well. So, but I loved it. I didn't like it as much as Heartless, but it was still really good. A Court of Silver Flames. I was really scared to read this book. I thought I was gonna hate it and I ended up loving it. This one is about Nesta and Cassian, and so I'd waited the whole series for this because I obviously knew it was happening and I knew it was coming, but I didn't expect to like this much, and I didn't expect to like actually love the character Nesta because I thought I was gonna hate her and I didn't. So that was really exciting and I'm really excited for the next book to come out in this series. Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. Christina Lauren is such a hit or miss. I either love their books or I hate them. This book is really good. When I picked it up, I thought it was gonna be set at a summer camp. It was not set at a summer camp. I don't know where I got that impression, but I really enjoyed this book. It was so good. The next book that I read was The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, and this book was so good. Again, this was another one that I read for my young adult fiction class, and I had never read this before, and I really enjoyed it. After that, I had another book for my young adult fiction class, and that one was The Poet X. I thought this book was really good. It has a lot of like, it's told in poetry, which is so cool. Again, unconventional writing, like I really explored that this year and I thought that was so cool. So I'd recommend this book. It's such a quick read because it is poetry. Like all of it is told in poems. So then I read the third Elsie Silver book, which is Powerless. And this one is another Forced Proximity. This is a childhood best friends. Again, another like cowboy romance. I think he's a hockey player. And then I read Rhapsodic. This one is like kind of like a deal with the devil type vibe. I think she like owes the devil favors. Really cool concept. I enjoyed it. It wasn't the most memorable book and I am not planning on reading the next one, so do with that what you will. I'm not sure if I would recommend it unless someone seemed like really into this idea. Okay, next I read Where We Left Off by Sapphire Hale. This book was actually really weird. I'm not gonna lie. This book was strange. It was kind of prepping me for a paranormal romance and then it just was not. We're getting into summer reads, and so if you want more detail about every book, I have an every book I read this summer video, so go watch that. After that, I read Dig, which was my final book for my young adult fiction class, and I really, really liked this one. It's about, I think, 6 young adults who are all related in some way, but you don't know how, and it's just their lives, their experiences. So good. I was actually sweating, so I had to take off the hoodie. Haunting Adeline. I don't know why I read this one after I read Does It Hurt? I just never learned my lesson. This book was kind of scary. I read it as a thriller, not as a romance, and that's how I'd recommend reading it, but I wouldn't recommend that one, to be honest. Next, I read Losing It, and this book was just not memorable at all. The pacing was kind of weird. I don't know. Also, just look how tiny this book is. Only 200 pages. It's very, very small. So next, I read Too Soon and to Spar. If you want more about the plot of this book, go check out my summer reads. This book was magnificent. I loved it. This is Martha Waters never misses. It's so good. If you like Bridgerton, read this series. Next, I read King of Battle and Blood. This book was not memorable at all. It was okay. Next, I read Practice Makes Perfect, and this book was so cute. I would definitely recommend it. This is the second book in the When in Rome series, but I never read the first one, but so good. I loved it. Next, I read The Playlist. This book was cute. It had like a lot of adorable little Taylor Swift references. This was like kind of a forced proximity childhood crush / friend. They went on a road trip together, which was just really cute. Next, we have If We Were Villains. This was probably one of my favorite books of this year. I loved it. This was like a secret history, but Shakespeare. And if you know me, you know I love Shakespeare. I have a whole little nook of my shelf dedicated to it. So I, of course, had to read this, and it was phenomenal. So good. Highly recommend. If you take one thing away from this video, please let it be this book. Next, I read Good Girl Complex, and I actually thought I would hate this book because I don't like Elle Kennedy. Her hockey series, I didn't like it at all. But this book was pretty good. You could definitely tell she doesn't really know what she's writing about, but that's okay. It was a fun read. Not sure I'd recommend it. Then I read Swear on This Life. This book was so good. I really liked it. This is a really cool like dual timeline book, which I really enjoyed. So I thought it was really good. This is a book that I would buy for a friend. Then I read Twisted Lies. This book was not that good. I'm gonna be so honest. Anna Huang, like, it's with her books, it's usually a swing and a miss, and so I wouldn't recommend the series. I didn't like it that much. This book is boring. I don't remember any of it. I think it was a single dad book, and I just remember being more interested in the main character's best friend's romance than the main character's romance. So next I read Kill Switch, and this is another one. Why did I do that? Why did I read this book? It wasn't phenomenal, but it definitely kept me on my toes. It was entertaining. Next I read Fear the Flames. This one is a fantasy book with like a reconnaissance mission. Very fun. Bit of like enemies to lovers, lots of banter, lots of found family. I really enjoyed this book. I wouldn't say it was like my all-time favorite, but it was pretty good. I won't read the sequel. Okay, this book I actually left at school, but it was Happy Place, and I adored it. This book was so, so, so good. I love Emily Henry. Then I read Nightfall. Look how big this book is. For starters, it's like a brick. It was good. Again, it was entertaining. I wouldn't recommend it. Then I read Runaway Love. This is another Melanie Harlow book, and this one was actually really cute. I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. I thought the banter was good. It was kind of a slow burn, which I enjoy. Single dad, adorable. I don't know why I read so much of the series and why I read it out of order. That's probably why I hated it so much. Then I read Hideaway. So again, not great, but entertaining. Next, I read Riley Sager's The House Across the Lake, and I actually really enjoyed this book. I thought it was kind of fun. It really kept me on my toes, and I never knew where the story was going, which I thought was very, very fun. Next, I read Done and Dusted. This is like a cowboy romance. It was cute. I was kind of disappointed by it. I'm gonna be honest. Like, I'm not sure if I would recommend it to a friend, but I enjoyed it. Next, I read The Wall of Winnipeg and Me, and this was actually, I think, my first Mariana Zapata book ever, and I really liked it. They were not kidding when they said slow burn, and I loved it. I love a slow burn, and this one was slow. Okay, next I read Finding You by Lena Hendricks, and this book was honestly not memorable. This is a brother's best friend. I think there's an age gap involved. It was okay. Then I read The Ritual. This book was kind of crazy. It was definitely chaotic. I enjoyed it. Like, for what it's worth, I enjoyed this book. Next, I read Emma, and this book, oh my god, I love this book. You all know. It's one of my top 5 favorite books of all time. So good. So it was exciting to get to read it again and like really talk about it from like a literary standpoint in one of my classes, and I really enjoyed it. And then taking a huge turn, I read this book for my teaching science class. This book is for 4th graders, but like if you have a 4th grade sibling, child, friend, I don't know, this book was good. I'd recommend it. And then I read This Summer I Turned Pretty. I actually had never read this book before, and I liked it. I thought it was cute. It was definitely a young adult book. And I actually did a reading vlog of this book, so go check that out. Change an angle. Next I read Playing Hard to Get by Monica Murphy, and this book actually is in my hated bin. I didn't like this book. I didn't like the way that they talked about women. I didn't love it. After that I read Things We Left Behind, and this actually is not the first in the series, and I think that that definitely screwed me over. It wasn't my favorite book. Next, I read Madame Bovary. This is another book for my class. First of all, the elephant in the room. This cover is awful. Why did they do that? But anyway, this book was so good. You have to read this. If you haven't read it, you need to read it. This is the ultimate, like, coquette Lana Del Rey book. Next, I read Into the Tide. This book was not memorable at all. So I'm not sure if I could recommend it or even like give a synopsis or like any of the tropes. Like, I don't remember anything that happened in this book. Okay, next I read Our Ride to Forever. So this is part of the Honeywood Fun Park series, and this is one of my favorite series like ever. It's so good. So I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was so cute, and this was the couple in the series that you didn't know were gonna get together, but it just makes so much sense. I was like, why didn't I think of that? The series starts with All Downhill with You, and I would highly recommend picking it up. Okay, next I actually read this book on Nook, which is the Barnes & Noble app. I like ran out of books, and so I was like, I need to buy something online and read it. And this book is Goodbye Never by, I think, Prescott Lane. It was okay. I realized about, like, after I'd finished it, I was writing about it in my book journal. I was like, this book reminds me of something. What does it remind me of? It's the plot of Dear John. Next I read 100 Years of Solitude. This book is good. Like, I'd say it deserved the Nobel Prize. When I was reading it, it was like pulling teeth. Like, I hated it while I was reading it. But the last, like, page made up for it so much. It was so good. So I'd recommend this book. I like could not explain to you what this is about. Like, a family? I don't know. But it was really good. Then I read Their Freefall at Last, and this is the last book in the Honeywood Fun Park series. And honestly, I was a little bit disappointed by this book. But again, if you read the series, you'd probably want to read this just because it ties everything up really nicely. Okay, another book that I don't have on me is The Insanity Offense. This book I read for one of my classes. Honestly, I wouldn't recommend it. It's kind of a dense, heavy book. But if you're into deinstitutionalization, you might want to check it out. I don't know. Next, I read My Dark Romeo, and this book wasn't that good. It wasn't that memorable, and it wasn't that, like, interesting. Next, I read White Teeth by Zadie Smith. This book was terrible. I have no reservation in saying that I did not like this book at all. We're getting down to like the last few books. This is crazy. Next, I read Thrive. I think this is the 6th book in the Addicted series. It was pretty good. I liked it. This book takes place over 2 years, so they cover a lot, and it's just like small moments from like every year, which I thought was cool. I liked it. It was pretty good. Next, I read A Visit from the Goon Squad, and this book was so cool. This book played with a lot of like fun literary styles, and I really enjoyed it. This copy is absolutely so beat up. Like, it's been to war, and fair enough. I enjoyed this book so much. It's probably one of my top reads of the year. Next up, we have Addicted After All. This is, I think, the 7th book in the Addicted series, and I didn't like it as much. I think I mainly just liked it because it had all of my favorite characters. And the most recent book that I've read this year is Where It All Began, and this book is actually really disappointing. This book was also by Sapphire Hale, so same author that wrote Where We Left Off, and I have been such a victim of her TikTok page. because she posts like little moments that happen in her book, and I'm like, yep, I'm getting it. And then the book is mid, so. All right, please, please, please ignore the way I look. I just finished the 60th book, and that was Wildfire by Hannah Grace, and this book wasn't great. I'm gonna be so honest. I DNF'd Icebreaker very early in. I was like, this book sucks, I hate the characters. So this was definitely a risk, but it wasn't terrible. Not sure if I would recommend it, but it was fun. So that was book 60. And that is all of the books that I've read this year. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far, I love you, you're amazing. And I hope you have a happy holiday season if I get this up in time. If I don't, I hope you have a wonderful new year. And just know you are so, so loved and you're awesome. So go read a book.